Hi everyone, Jeremy here from Victor Studio, and today in this video I'll share with you how to install and use the asset in the personal brand pack. So if you're ready, let's check it out. Alright, so you can buy this pack on our website. There's a link for it in the description below. Once you get it, you will get the zip file. Just double click on it to unzip it. In the folder, you'll then find a couple of things. You get the license, the installation instruction, the DFX file, and the font. Please make sure to install all the font, otherwise the title will not work because Davinci will not know what font to use. So just select all the font and then double click on them to start the installation process. Once that's done, you can go over to the DFX file and double click on it to start the installation of that. Right now, I already have that pack installed, so it's asking me if I want to override it. I can just select that, but for you, you will just have to click install. Then once you're in Davinci Resolve, you can go over to Effect, Titles, Video Studio, and then you can scroll all the way until you find the personal brand pack. This pack contains over 100 assets for Davinci Resolve, including backgrounds, intro cards, typography, callouts, timelines, lists, time and date, image loader, and infographics. It is packed with a wide variety of assets to help you elevate the quality of your video and the look of your personal brand on social media. All of the assets are plug and play, super easy to use, and very granular in how much you can change to make them fit your project perfectly. But also they've been designed to work perfectly out of the box with like a minimalistic style that should fit most aesthetic. In this video, I'll share with you how to use most of those assets. I will not go through each asset one by one, but more so through each category. What are the specific things that you can modify and that you can tweak to get the look that you want, as well as the specific functionality of some of those assets. Before getting started and going through each of those categories, quick general note on the pack. First off, it works with any frame rate and any aspect ratio, meaning that it will work just as well for horizontal timeline if I drag that in as vertical timeline. If I drag the same one in here in vertical, as you can see, it will fit well. Just you're gonna need to adjust the resizing, and then here you will have it fit perfectly your vertical timeline as well. Usually this is not the case by default in Davinci Resolve. Assets don't automatically rescale from horizontal to vertical. We develop our own method to make that happen, and that will be the case for any of our pack moving forward. Before that, for years, the only way to make that happen was to use the compound clip method. I will link to a video I've made about that topic in the description below. But basically, this is not the case anymore for those assets. They will automatically rescale no matter your aspect ratio. You will just need to adjust the size to make it fit your viewer. Now, a quick note on performance. Some of the assets will work great directly in terms of playback. You can just add them and you will get a real-time playback right away. But sometimes, depending on the complexity of the title, the functionality, or the type of animation, those assets might be a lot heavier, and therefore you might drop a few frames. For example, when we are using follower animation, meaning the letter animating one by one, those sometimes can be slightly heavier to play, but more specifically things that are a lot more complex, like list, for example, those ones are definitely gonna, struggle a little bit in terms of playback. Right now we're getting 14 FPS on a 30 FPS timeline. The way to get around that is simply to go over to your playback tab, select render cache, and then here select smart. It's just gonna bring here that bar right above your title. That's gonna turn from red to blue, and when it's fully blue, that means that your title has been fully cached in and you will be able to get real-time playback. And as you can see, as I'm playing it, I'm getting 30 FPS now on that list title. Just note that if you make any modification to that title again, it will need to be recached yet again. So what I will recommend is simply to drag it in, make all the design adjustment that you need that title to have, and then adjust the length of it, play it through once so it render cache, and then when you'll continue to edit, it will be properly render cached and you will get real-time playback. Now, with that being said, let's jump into each of the categories that are available in this pack. First off, we have the background. For the background, we have two types of assets. We have some animated texture and we have some animated gradient. Let's start first with the texture. Here, for example, I'm going to drag first that grunge texture and then extend it to whatever length I want. You'll have a continuous animation throughout the entirety of the background. It is basically a static texture that has been animated in 4 different positioning. So it gives that feeling that, the framing is changing. So you have 5 different textures that you can choose from. You have dust, grunge, halftone, paper, and plastic. And each of those textures got up to 9 different textures within that category that you can choose from. Now that's not it, because you do have a lot of different customization that you can do to those background. You are not stuck with that default one. You can adjust your own color. So here, for example, if you like that background to have some red hue in it, you can just add the color mixer on. You need to maybe switch it in the timeline quickly, so it's affecting the change. And then here you can choose basically the different apply mode that will greatly affect the way that color is distributed on the texture. So here, for example, if you want something that are affecting mostly the white, you can select multiply, and it will affect only the white in the image and not the blacks. You can also adjust the overall gain of that hue to have it more subtle or being a lot more intense. You can also adjust the overall size and position of that background. For example, here, if you want to zoom in a bit more into the texture, you can do that. You can also adjust the placement of each of the individual frame that are being sequentially switched. So here, as you can see, we have multiple frames switching from one to the other. Basically, you have control over the adjustment of each of those frames individually. So for example, you can choose to adjust the size and the position of one frame, and then move a couple frames forward up to the moment of that frame is switching, and then do the same thing here by adjusting, for example, the size and the position of that frame. That might give you just more control over the overall animation. If, for example, you're not happy with the way it looks, you could just really fine tune that right there. Now we also have a contrast, so you can adjust the gain, you can adjust the lift, the gamma, the contrast to just really fine tune the background as you want and give it the pop that you want. We also have a grid control. So here you can turn that grid on by increasing the opacity up to 1, and you will have that grid showing up. That grid got a lot of different functionality in terms of here, the line and the shape. So you have different categories that you can choose from. You can choose to have no shape, in which case you will get only the line. You can have the shape at the intersection to be either circle, square, or cross. You also have control over different type of line. You have the general fill line, we have dash, and we have detailed. You can change the control of each of those individually, and you can adjust the overall size of that grid by reducing the number of square or increasing it. You can also blend it a bit more by reducing here the opacity, so it feels like it's integrating a bit better with your background, for example. And then we have a dim vignette where you can reduce the overall intensity of the background by adding a dim layer in front of it. You can also adjust the vignetting on the entire background. There is a vignette control where here you can reduce or increase that vignette, and you can reduce or increase the softness of that vignette. Just keep in mind that the more elements you're going to add and modify here in the inspector, the trickier it might be to play your background. For the usage of backgrounds in general, I will highly recommend to use render in place, because you're going to stack probably a lot of different motion graphic above that background, and that might just tank the playback over time. To render in place, just right click on the background, click render in place, select the parameter that you want, render it wherever you want on your computer, and then Davinci just going to render that specific background. That way, when you're gonna play it, you will not experience any issue at all. I will recommend that if you're gonna use that background for, let's say, more than 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, even longer than that. That way it's not gonna affect at all any of the elements that you're gonna just drag on top of it. Now in background, we also have some gradient background. So here you have 5 different gradient background that you can choose from. I'm just going to take this one, for example, and I'm going to extend it here in my timeline. And as you can see right now, if I play it, we can see a little bit of bending. So to get rid of that, you can just toggle here the grain on and off, or like modify any other parameter in that asset to just remove that bending completely. It's just the way Davinci is processing gradients somehow in the edit page as macro. They need to be some sort of like recached inside of Fusion to get rid of that. I'm not sure what that's the case, but basically to simply get rid of that, just here double click on any parameter and that will fix it. I'm not going to go in depth on how to modify this background. If you want to check that out, I have a full breakdown of this in the sample video that I will link in the description below. And you can test, I believe, this gradient right here for free if you want to check it out. But quickly, you have access here to some grain. You can choose any of the color, and you can choose the shape of the fast noise, the vortex, the way it distorts the image. And here in the fast noise, you can adjust also the speed of the animation. So right now, the C trace is what controls the speed. So if you're increasing that, as you can see, the speed is going to be faster. If you're decreasing that, the speed is going to be slower. You also have the general contrast again and theme control that we've seen in the previous background. Now let's move on to the next category, which is intro cards. In intro card, you can choose from 15 different type of card. We get some video intro and some chapter card. So they all share very similar adjustment. Here, if I'm taking this one, for example, and dragging it in the timeline, as you can see here, there's a couple of things we can adjust in the inspector. First off, we got some animation control. We can choose the animation speed of that title. So here it's about 2 seconds, but if I increase that to 4 seconds, it will be, slower to just show up. And if I decrease that to 1 second, it will be faster to come into frame. You can also control the animation in and out, on, off, and you have control over the overall size position. If you want to decrease the size, adjust the position and the angle, you can switch the text for whatever you want. So here, for example, Davinci Resolve, then we can change the secondary text, how to edit, and then, for example, your name. Video editor studio. For each of those, you have control over the font, the size, the color, and the overall position. For example, if you want to bring that back up so it's closer to how to edit, you can do that. Then reducing the overall size, you can also switch here to have it fill instead of an outline. So then we will just need to switch the color of that text to black. But also here, one interesting control for most of those assets inside of the card category is that you have the follower animation option exported. So you can choose the style in which each letter is going to come into frame, and you can choose the delay between each of those letters. So right now, by default, it's inside out, but you can choose it to come from left to right, for example. And now when that is selected, it will come from left to the right. So you can control here left to right, right to left, inside out, outside in, random one by one, completely random, and manual curve. You can also control the delay with which each of those letters are gonna come into frame. That can be very helpful here if you want it to be very slow or very fast. So you can use that in combination with here the animation length. If you have it, for example, at 4 seconds, and you want the animation of each of those letters to take a little longer to come into frame, well, you could just do that right here by adjusting, let's say, to 3 or 4, and now each of the letter animation gonna take longer as well. And that's pretty much it for the card. They all share very similar functionality. You just can replace the text that you want, adjust the size and position to make it fit, and you should be good to go. Then next up, we have typography, which contain a bunch of subcategories with one-liners, introductions, paragraphs, call to action, info cards, questions, quotes, and locations. I'm not going to go through each of those categories because they are basically sharing very similar functionality than the intro card. As you can see right now, if I drag that cinematic title right in, it's sharing most of the functionality that we've seen previously, at the exception that, for example, this one got a glow, so you can adjust the glow size, you can adjust the glow intensity, and the general blend. We do, however, have a few titles that have some specific functionality, like, for example, this call to action button right here, and you have an icon selection with a range of over 2000 icons that you can choose from. So here, for example, by default, we have a simple bell, but you could choose to have a bell with different sub icon inside of them. You can switch it for example, a heart, and a bunch of other icons. The list is pretty long, so I'll let you scroll through it and see the stuff that you need. The easiest way is just quickly to search what you want. So search, for example, heart here, and it will just bring you to the heart section. But if somehow you don't find the icon that you need in those 2000 of icon, which is very possible, you can here select custom icon and bring the icon that you want. So here for now, it's a blank screen, but I can then just here select in icon browse. I can just drag any PNG icon that I want to bring in here, for example, for Instagram, and it will be loaded right now in my icon loader. You can then adjust the overall size and position if it doesn't really fit, let's say, box that you have. You can then change the color of the icon if you wanted to make it red, like so. You can do that, and then it's the general, size and position here, text, so on and so forth. To the exception that this one, because it's not using a follower animation, you have more control over the animation in and out. Here you can control from none, zoom in, zoom out, pan left, pan right, slide up, slide down, and fade in. And you can do that for the animation in and the animation out. So right now, as you can see, it's coming from the bottom as slide up, but if I wanted to have it being zoom in instead, I can just select that, and now the animation will be changed. You can find that icon selector generally with any title that have icon. For example, with that fact box right here, you could use it to switch it from here, that arrow, to whatever icon we have available, or whatever icon that you wish to import instead, that will reflect or give like a visualizer for the thing that you're inputting for the text. While we are in the info card, I'm really excited to show you that glass effect box, which has been fairly tricky to make easy to export and use. It sounds very simple, but it's actually pretty complicated here in Fusion. As you open it, now you might understand why sometimes some of those assets are a bit heavy. By the way, you can control everything you want right here in Fusion. So if you know what you are doing in Fusion, you can always open any of the title and work directly through them. They are not gatekeep. You can just take a look and make the modification you need if there is somehow not the parameter that you need in the edit page. But you should have everything you need directly in the edit page. But basically, because that title needs to process also what's happening in the background, for example, here the playback might be pretty bad. So that's one of the trade-offs of having some cool effect like those, is that sometimes they are pretty hard to play. But here for this glass effect, you have control over a bunch of stuff. You can adjust obviously the position, and then here place it in a lower third, for example. You can adjust the soft edge. You can adjust the border width of that glass element, the corner radius, the width, the height, so on and so forth. And then you have control over the granularity of the actual glass material. So here we can increase the blur size to make your text pop more. You can adjust the lift to have it being a dark glass or being a brighter glass. You can adjust the refraction strength on the edges, as well as the light pour, the spread, so on and so forth. I'll let you play around with that. That's a bit abstract, depending on the kind of look that you want, but it should work out of the box pretty much. And then you have the overall control for the content with the icon, the text, and the drop shadow behind it. Some of those assets are point text, and some of those assets are box text, meaning that they are within the border of a box and they are adapting automatically to that box to stay within that box. So if you want to, let's say, extend or adjust the box itself, well, you would need to go over to the text, add whatever text you want. As you can see, it's staying within that box. But right now, if I want to add more width, I will need to go down here and extend the width of that box for the text to be stretching. And then I can readapt that here to my title. But now, as you can see, it's very helpful whenever you're working with paragraph, because you don't need to make any formatting. You can just copy paste whatever format you want, and it will automatically keep the dimension of the box. Now in quote, there is quite an interesting one right here, which is highlight quote. This one is free for download with the simple link in the description in case you haven't bought the pack yet. It's a pretty cool one that share both animation with the text coming in and then a highlight animation highlighting whatever part of the quote that you want. It has the same way of working as I mentioned earlier with the text box without the box itself, but it was necessary to make the highlight work. So basically here you can increase the overall width, adjust that text. if you want it to, be aligned in a certain way. Add whatever text more you want. Here we go. And it will adapt to that box. And if you then need to adjust the highlight, let's say we want to highlight only creativity is intelligence, well, we can adjust here the highlight starting point by going over to the creativity first letter, and then we can just push it to the end of intelligence, and we will have the title coming in and then the highlight happening. So that's pretty much it for typography. Again, they are sharing most of the same functionalities. So right now you should have a pretty good idea on how most of them are working, and you should be able to modify them as you want. As you'll play around with 2 or 3 of them, you'll quickly understand the logic behind it, and it's pretty straightforward. Pretty much everything you see on screen, you are able to edit. Now let's move on to the next category, which are the callouts and pointers. In this category, you get about 15 titles that you can choose from. You get some usual callout, you get some pointers and measurement, and you get also some tags. I'm not sure if those should be here. They might be, replaced in typography, but we're using those generally as tags next to an object, a person, and something like that. So I choose to put them here for now. For the callout, it's pretty straightforward. Just drag and drop them, and then you have control over the position of that callout. So here you can flip it to the left or to the right, vertically or horizontally, to really place it exactly where you want on screen. You can adjust the overall size and position of that callout, and here you have control over the line with the point. So here you can control the point, place it wherever you want on screen. And then you have the second point of that branch right here that you can place wherever you want on screen as well. And same goes for the third point, which also are linked to the text right here. You can then change also the color, the border width, the corner radius of that point. So here, for example, as you can see, a circle, but we can make it a square as well. And we can choose also the border width of the line. So we can reduce it to be thinner, or we can have it being thicker. We can also here adjust the text. And as you increase the text for this one specifically, the box is gonna automatically adapt, but you really do have a lot of flexibility. For example, here you could remove the entrepreneur if you don't want to have that line. Then here is simply adjusting the position of then that box. Here we go. And now you have a single line callout. We have another callout that I think is quite interesting, which is this one. I look at a slight quirks in the way you need to edit it for it to work properly. So it's the same thing here where you can adjust, the flip position of the text. And then here for that box specifically, if I go over to point and line, I can adjust the width and I can adjust the height, but as you can see, it might get distorted if that's not a square. It's not supposed to be a rectangle, so you just need to make sure to adjust the height accordingly for it to get back the proper value. So that's the only thing to be aware of for something like this one, that those lines are going to be slightly distorted if you don't get a perfect square. But that might be something that you want if you want, for example, here to have it being slightly more stretched, or you can do that. But that's pretty much it. That's a fairly interesting one, in my opinion. In this category, we also have some measurement. So here, for example, we could take that pointer and then we can adjust the overall line to be either arrow or a circle. We can adjust the scale of that line to take, for example, the entire screen or less than that. Change the text to whatever we want. So here, for example, 25 centimeter instead. We can adjust the edges style. So here we can reduce the circle. We can change the color and do the same thing here for the line by adjusting the line thickness and changing, for example, the color as well. Now we are getting into categories that are a bit heavier to play with the timelines. So in this one, you have 5 different timelines that you can choose from that allow you to display each point of your video or different part of process or roadmap, for example. Let's bring here timeline number 3 and extend it. As you can see right now, the animation will go from point 1 to point 5. In this, we can select the number of points that we want. So here, if we want only 3 points, we can select 3 points and it will remove the 0.4 and the 0.5. But as you can see, the line is still extending to the maximum. It's because here we also have control over the animation of the line. Meaning that now, because I have only 3 points, I can select from 0.2 to 0.3 and the animation will go only from 0.2 to 0.3 and not overextend. Now let me show you with the number 5, which is slightly more advanced, what you could potentially do with it. The reason for those point count and animation is to offer you the possibility to bring each of those points one by one as you want. So for example, here I could select to have no animation out, and I'm now going to make 5 different cuts to have the animation going from one point to the other wherever I want. For example, here in the video, if I want to first have the point 1 to point 2 happening here, is going to be the first one. Then I'm going to make a cut. I'm going to select my second point. Here, switch the animation to none. That way it will be static. And in all first point, here we're going to select from point 1 to point 2. And then on our second one, we're going to select from point 2 to point 3. Meaning that now first title going to go from point 1 to point 2. Is going to wait whatever length we want it to wait. So here we can extend that as much as we want. And then on the second part, it's going to resume from point 2 to point 3. And then we can continue to do that here by making another cut wherever we want and switching from point 3 to point 4. And then finally from point 4 to point 5, I'll make a cut and I'll switch from point 4 to point 5. And now we have basically that animation, but with the exact timing that we wanted. For example, if you have a voiceover that is enunciating a process or something like that, you can do it like that. For timeline number 4, a quick tips also. I really like this one. I think it looks great, but we didn't really have the possibility to have the point control for this. But a quick tip, if you want to reduce the amount of point, you can always go here to settings and then go over to crop. And here in crop right, you can reduce, and then here in crop right, you can increase the crop to remove the point that you didn't want. For example, here we have only 4 points. Here we go. Now let's move on to our list category, which share very similar functionality. Here, let's bring the list. I'm going to drag list number 1 in, and I'm going to extend it. As you can see, by default, all the points are coming together, coming from point 1 to point 10. We can control the amount of points that we have right here through that drop down. So if we want to have only 6 or 5 points, we can select that right here. And if we now want to increase the spacing between each of those points, we can just go over to point spacing, and it will automatically adjust to the same distance each of the points. You can always then go back to, if you want 6 points, you can do that. If you want to select 4 points, you can do that as well. You can choose to have them on the left side, or you can choose to have them on the right side. But also here we have another functionality. We can choose to animate them with the timing that we want, similar to the timeline animation, from group to individual. The way to do that is simply here, make all the modification that we want for the final list to look like. So change the text, change the bullet point, the font, whatever you need. Just do all those modifications first, and then we can choose off the timing. So what I'm gonna do now is simply here on my title, I'm gonna select individual. And now what it does, as you can see, it's bringing only the last point. So here if we have 4 points, it's going to bring only the last point. So what you can do is here making the amount of cut that you need. If you want point 1 to appear here, just make a cut here, then point 2 a bit further, and then point 3 and 4. Now what we'll do is like here, the point 1, we're going to select point 1, then point 2, we're going to select point 2, point 3, we're going to select point 3, and then point 4, we're going to select point 4. And now essentially at the beginning of each of those titles, we're going to have their respective point appearing. Now, in addition to this, we've added a couple of tools to help you make exactly the list that you want. For example, the list number 3, it got tick boxes, but it's not the case for the other list because of just the style of those lists. But what you can do is here using the checkbox and cross tool to bring that checkbox as you want. So here I'm going to stack it right above my list. And whenever, for example, I want to emphasize on that point, we're going to bring that checking coming in. So I'm going to reduce the size of that checking, and I'm going to add it right next to my first point. So now I have all my points coming in. And when I'm mentioning the first point, I will have the checkbox coming in. You can choose from check to cross, and you can also adjust obviously the color, the level, the soft edge, the bold width to really make it look as you want. For example, here, if you want to have something that is a lot thinner, if you want to change that to red, and if you want to change the check to green, you can do that very easily. We've also added an icon tool. So here, instead of having a check and cross animation, you want to use any other icon to emphasize your point. Well, you can do that right here. Or again, if you want to add your own custom icon, you can do that by loading here whatever icon you want in custom icon, browse, then dragging your PNG, and now it will be loaded. And you can then do the same thing here, adjusting the overall position and placing it wherever you need on screen. Now, next category, we got time and date. So this is to help you display time and dates. Basically, we have, again, a few glass title, but most of them are fairly simple. They are very close to the typography. Some here are gonna have some line that automatically adjust. You can completely remove this to just keep only one line, or you can add whatever you want here and the line gonna be adjusted automatically. It's the same thing here for some of the text box. You also have control over the custom icon again as well here if you want to switch that. Very simple and easy to use asset and nothing new in terms of functionality. So now for the next category, we got image loader. This is 10 different assets to help you display images with text. They have like basically interesting border, and it's just a great way to bring in images inside of your videos. Right now, I've dragged the image loader one in my timeline. And as you can see, we got an interesting animation with each of the image showing one by one. We do have quite a lot of control in the inspector to adjust that. We can choose to have them coming in one by one, or we can select all at once, in which case they will come all at once together. You can also choose between a few different styles. We got Polaroid, blur, and none. With Polaroid, you're gonna have basically a white frame above the image that's gonna make it look like the photo is developing. We can also choose a blur, in which case it's just gonna reveal the picture with a blur step by step. And then finally, we got none, in which case it will just show up the picture as intended without any further animation. You can adjust the strength of both the blur and the Polaroid, as well as the color of the Polaroid, but I will stick it to white, honestly. To load any of your images, you can go here to images, open images one, and for example here load whatever you want. In our case here, I can just use the PNG and that will load the Instagram logo, but you can load any picture you want right there. And that's the case for each of those images. You can also change the frame. If you desire to load another frame and you have like your own frame that you would like to load, you can do that right here by loading your own frame. So they all pretty much share the exact same functionality. They just have a different look, design, but they are very similar in terms of how you use them. And now for the final section of this pack, we got infographics. So here in infographics, you get a wide variety of stuff. We got some counters, we got some bar chart, we got some text chart. There is quite a lot of things that you can do, and each of those got their own functionality. Here, let's start with something simple with that infographic circle. So here I can just drag that in, and we got a circle representing 75%. As you are adjusting here that circle, it will automatically change the text right there. You can then control the look of that circle, and you can control the text. We also have things like that range of prices. As you can see, I can choose to have my range 1 being on the bar wherever I want and my range 2 on the bar wherever I want. Then I can go over to the range, choose the value that I want. For example, here, if we don't want euros, we want any other value, dollar, yen, whatever, we can do that right here. Or even, for example, percentages. We can just do that right there as a prefix or as a suffix. You can then adjust the number of that values. So for example, here, if I want to have 2,500 instead, I can do that right here. Another one that I really like is that pros and cons list. So here, you have those lists coming in. It's sharing pretty much the exact same functionality as in the list category, but it's slightly more complex and it's more related to infographics. So I've chosen to put it here. But here you can choose the number of points for the pros and the cons. So if we want to have, let's say, 3 pros and only 2 cons, we can do that right here. And you can do the same thing here with the individual point coming one by one. We have also some bar chart here with different categories that you can switch here for travel budgeting to any other element, monthly budget, for example. Then we can reduce that size, and then we can change each of the categories for the text. The way it works right here is we've created tabs, meaning I will suggest that you change first the number. So here, for example, if we want to say $3,000, we're gonna do that and then delete the one previously in order to not break that tab. Because if you break this, as you can see, you're gonna bring the text back to this, and then there is no way to readjust that. So make sure you're making the text right after, and then you're deleting your old text, and you're not going back too far. And then here you can change whatever text you want to food, for example. Here we go. You can change the number of bars. If you want to have only 3, you can do that right there. But if you need more, you can easily here select 5, for example, then duplicate that title on the track above, delete here in the monthly budget, and then adjust the overall size and position to bring those bars down and bring the previous one up. That way you are extending from 5 to 10 bar. So we can easily combine elements like that to make it work. Right now, obviously, the animation will need to be adjusted. For example, rather than having zoom in, we would select something like slide down, and now they will all move in the right direction, and it will look like it's animated all together. All right, so that's it for this pack presentation. That was a lot of stuff to cover. I hope that gives you a pretty good overview on what you can do with that pack. There is really a lot of great functionality built in to help you make your workflow smoother and increase the quality of your videos. Again, you can find that pack available on our website with the link in the description below. And if you watched the video until now, but you haven't purchased the pack, you can just try out the sample with the link in the description as well to give you an idea if that pack is a right fit for you. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Speed up your workflow and create better videos using the pack available on our website, including titles, transition, and templates built only for Davinci Resolve. Get started today by downloading our free starter pack that contains over 150 elements. Link in the description below or at videoeditorstudio.com.